The heat hits your skin first, not like sunlight, like standing too close to a forge. The bronze wall behind your back begins to warm. You press your palms against the metal, searching for a cool spot that doesn't exist. Outside, you hear voices, laughter, the crackling of wood being fed into flames. Inside this hollow chamber, you realize with absolute clarity that you are going to die, but you won't die quietly. Your screams will become music, because you designed it that way. Before we step deeper into this nightmare, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It genuinely amazes me that a story this dark, from so long ago, can connect us across every continent today. Sicily, 570 BC, the coastal city of Acragas, gleams white under the Mediterranean sun, wealthy beyond measure from sulfur, salt, and grain. But in the palace courtyard, something is being unveiled that will make this city's name synonymous with horror for the next 2,500 years. A bronze bull, life-sized, polished to mirror brightness, stands before the tyrant Phalaris. The craftsman beside it is trembling, not from fear, not yet, from pride. His name is Paralos, and he believes he's about to become the richest artist in the Greek world. He has no idea he's looking at his own coffin. To understand how genius curdles into nightmare, you need to understand the man who commissioned this masterpiece of cruelty. Phalaris didn't inherit power. He seized it through deception, so elegant it became legendary. When he asked the citizens of Acragas for permission to build a temple to Zeus on the city's highest point, they gave him money, laborers, and their trust. He built a fortress instead. On the day of the supposed temple dedication, while the city's leaders feasted in celebration, his mercenaries, disguised as construction workers, stormed the armory and slaughtered anyone who resisted. By sunrise, Phalaris controlled Acragas absolutely. For 15 years, he maintained that control through calculated terror. Public executions became theater. Political opponents were roasted alive in their own armor. Enemies disappeared in the night. According to the historian Diodorus Siculus, Phalaris understood something fundamental about tyranny that still echoes today. Fear is most effective when it's creative, when it becomes a story that spreads beyond the execution itself. When people lie awake imagining it, but routine brutality becomes boring. Crucifixions, beheadings, bodies thrown from cliffs. These methods worked, but they lacked artistry. The crowds grew numb. Phalaris needed something unforgettable, something that would make resistance unthinkable. Paralos of Athens arrived with a solution. He was a bronze worker, renowned throughout the Greek world, a man whose technical skill was matched only by his ambition. He'd spent months designing something revolutionary, something that combined execution with entertainment, engineering with acoustic perfection. He believed that if he could create the ultimate instrument of terror, Phalaris would reward him with gold status, a permanent position at court. He had catastrophically misread his patron. The bull stood roughly 6 feet tall and 8 feet long, cast from solid bronze, hollow inside. Its surface was polished until it reflected like water, decorated with intricate engravings of flowers and geometric patterns, beautiful, almost sacred-looking. But the genius, the horror, lay hidden inside its head. A complex system of tubes and stops, similar to a primitive pipe organ, designed to transform human screams into something else entirely. The pitch would shift based on the intensity of agony. High shrieks would become low bellowing. Desperate gasps would sound like an angry bull snorting. Pain would become performance. Paralos explained every detail to Phalaris with the enthusiasm of an artist unveiling his masterwork. how the victim would be locked inside through a trapdoor in the bull's side, how the fire beneath would gradually heat the bronze, cooking them slowly, how the screams would entertain the audience with music. He demonstrated the door mechanism. He explained the acoustic engineering. He waited for praise. Phalaris listened carefully. He examined the bull, testing the lock, studying the pipe system in the head. Then he looked at Paralaus with the detached curiosity of a man observing an interesting insect. "Your invention is remarkable," the tyrant said. "But how do I know it works as you claim?" "Demonstrate it from inside." The guards seized Paralaus before understanding could become flight. According to the Roman-era writer Lucian, who preserved multiple accounts of this moment, the craftsman begged, "My lord, I built this for your enemies, not for me. I am loyal." Phalaris remained seated, unmoved. "If you are truly loyal, then you will be honored to be the first to prove your invention's worth." They forced him through the bull's side door. The opening was deliberately small, designed to make insertion difficult and undignified. They had to fold his body, pushing his head down, bending his legs, cramming him into the bronze chamber he'd spent months perfecting. The interior was dark, cramped, claustrophobic. His hands scrambled against smooth metal, finding no purchase, no escape. The door slammed shut. A bolt slid home. For a moment, silence. Paralaus could hear only his own breathing, rapid and panicked, echoing in the bronze chamber. The space was barely large enough for a man to crouch. He couldn't stand. He couldn't lie down comfortably. He could only wait, pressed against the metal that would soon become his execution. Outside, Phalaris nodded. Servants fed wood and charcoal into the brazier positioned directly beneath the bull's belly. The fire caught quickly. Bronze conducts heat with terrifying efficiency. Inside, Paralaus felt the change within minutes. The metal floor against his feet began warming, not painfully at first, just uncomfortably, like sun-heated stone. He shifted his weight, trying to minimize contact, but there was nowhere to go. The heat built gradually, systematically. 5 minutes in, the bronze was hot enough that he pulled his feet up, trying to crouch on his heels. 10 minutes, and he pressed his back against the wall, only to jerk away as that surface, too, had begun heating. 15 minutes, and Paralaus was screaming. His cries burst forth involuntarily as the bronze reached temperatures that seared skin on contact. He tried to position himself in the center of the chamber, touching as little surface as possible, but the superheated air itself became torture. Each breath scorched his lungs. The metal surfaces glowed dull red in the darkness. Outside, just as Paralaus had engineered, the screams transformed. The complex pipe system in the bull's head captured the sound of his agony and filtered it through bronze tubes. High-pitched shrieks became deep, resonant bellowing. The rapid gasping between screams sounded like an angry bull snorting. Even his desperate pounding against the walls created a rhythmic effect that mimicked hoof stamping. Phalaris stood and walked closer to admire the effect. "Remarkable," he said to his courtiers. "It truly does sound like a bull. The musician plays his own requiem." According to Lucian's account, Phalaris let Paralaus remain in the bull for approximately 30 minutes. Long enough to prove the device worked perfectly, not long enough to kill him completely. The tyrant wanted Paralaus alive for what came next. Guards opened the door and dragged out what remained of the bronze worker. His skin was covered in burns, sections already blistering and peeling. His voice was destroyed from screaming, reduced to a raw croak. His hair had been singed. The smell of cooked flesh filled the air. But he was conscious, barely. Phalaris looked down at the broken man at his feet. You have proven your invention works flawlessly. For that, I thank you. However, I cannot allow the existence of a man so creative in cruelty. Who knows what other devices you might dream up for my enemies to use against me?" He gestured to the guards. "Take him to the cliff." They dragged Perilos to the edge of Akragas's Acropolis and threw him over. He fell nearly 300 feet, his body shattering against the rocks below. The tyrant had his perfect instrument, and he had ensured its secrets died with its creator. For the next 15 years, the brazen bull became the centerpiece of Phalaris's reign of terror. The device wasn't used for common criminals. Ordinary thieves and murderers were still executed through conventional means. The bull was reserved for special occasions. For people, Phalaris wanted to make examples of political opponents who threatened his rule, wealthy citizens whose property he wanted to confiscate, foreign ambassadors who needed to carry terrifying stories back to their cities, philosophers who spoke too freely about tyranny and justice. Diodorus Siculus noted that Phalaris particularly enjoyed using the bull during public festivals and celebrations. He would schedule executions to coincide with religious holidays, positioning the bronze bull in the center of Akragas's main plaza. Citizens were expected to attend. Absence was noted, recorded, remembered. The process became ritualized, theatrical. The condemned would be paraded through the city, giving onlookers time to gather. Heralds would announce the crimes, real or fabricated. Then the victim would be stripped and forced into the bull before the assembled crowd. The fire would be lit with ceremony, almost religious in its precision. Musicians would sometimes play during the performance, their instruments blending with the modified screams emerging from the bull's mouth. Some victims died within the first hour as their bodies succumbed to heat stroke and their lungs failed from breathing superheated air. Others survived much longer. Their agonies extended as the executioners carefully modulated the fire, letting it cool slightly before building it back up. The longest recorded survival time, according to ancient sources, was nearly 4 hours, though by the end it's unclear whether the sounds emerging from the bull were screams, or simply the death rattles of a body shutting down. One particularly horrific account comes from the poet Pindar, who described an execution where Phalaris hosted a banquet. The bronze bull was positioned outside the dining hall, close enough that the music of its operation could be heard throughout the meal. Phalaris reportedly told his guests that the sounds improved the flavor of their food, that suffering and luxury should always be enjoyed together. The psychological impact extended far beyond those who died in the bull. The device's presence alone became a weapon. Political rivals could be threatened with being introduced to the bull. Merchants who complained about taxes would be reminded that the bull is always hungry. Children in Akragas grew up with the bronze beast as a permanent fixture in their city's center, a constant reminder of their tyrant's power. But here's what the ancient sources rarely emphasize. What gets lost in the horror of individual executions, the brazen bull changed the entire psychology of the city. Akragas had been a democracy before Phalaris, a place where citizens debated openly in the agora, where disagreement was the foundation of civic life. The bull didn't just kill individuals, it killed conversation. It killed trust, because if you couldn't be certain, your neighbor wouldn't report your words to Phalaris. If every complaint about taxes or comment about justice might be twisted into treason, then silence became survival. The ancient writer Polyanos recorded that Phalaris employed a network of informants who would circulate through markets and taverns, listening for dissent. Anyone who spoke critically of the tyrant, even in private, risked being the next performer in the Bronze Theater. The bull was always there in the plaza, empty but present, a constant reminder. You didn't need to see someone die in it every day for it to do its work. The possibility was enough. But Phalaris made the error that all tyrants eventually make. He believed his power would last forever. He believed that fear, systematically applied, creates permanent submission. He was wrong. In 554 BC, after nearly 16 years of rule, the citizens of Akragas finally had enough. Rebellions had been brewing for years, carefully hidden, patiently organized in whispers and coded messages, in meetings disguised as religious ceremonies. The moment it broke into the open, it came swiftly. According to multiple ancient sources, including Diodorus Siculus and Pollianus, the rebels stormed Phalaris's palace during a festival when his attention was divided, when his guards were spread thin throughout the city. The tyrant was captured alive. His guards, seeing the tide had turned, abandoned him. Some accounts say they joined the rebels. Others claim they simply fled, unwilling to die for a man who had ruled through fear rather than loyalty. The same citizens who had been forced to watch executions in the bronze bull now held their tormentor's fate in their hands. The decision was unanimous. They would give Phalaris the same death he'd given so many others. The rebels dragged Phalaris through the streets of Akragas, past the same plaza where he had staged his theatrical executions. The bronze bull still stood there, a hated monument to his reign. They stripped him, they opened the door, and they forced the tyrant inside his own device. As the fire was lit beneath the bull that final time, the crowd didn't scatter in fear as they had been forced to do for 16 years. They stayed, they watched, and according to some accounts, they cheered. The screams that emerged from the bull that day, transformed by Perilles's ingenious pipe system into deep animal bellowing, were different. They were the sounds of justice, of vengeance, of a city finally free. Phalaris lasted approximately 2 hours before the sounds stopped. When they finally opened the bull and pulled out his corpse, the bronze interior was stained dark with residue that could never be fully cleaned. They left his body unburied, denying him the funeral rites that Greek culture considered essential for the soul's journey to the afterlife. The bronze bull itself faced various fates depending on which historical account you believe. Some sources claim the citizens of Akragas melted it down immediately, destroying the symbol of their oppression. Others say it was preserved as a warning against tyranny, eventually making its way to Carthage during the Punic Wars and later to Rome, where it may have been displayed as a curiosity in the Forum. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder claimed to have seen a bronze bull in Rome during the 1st century AD that was supposedly Phalaris's original, though by his time, nearly 600 years after the tyrant's death, authenticity was impossible to verify. What survived with absolute certainty was the story. Ancient historians preserved it not as entertainment, but as warning. They wanted future generations to understand something fundamental about power and cruelty. Lucian of Samosata, writing in the 2nd century AD, used the tale of Perillus and Phalaris as a cautionary lesson about the nature of evil. He wrote that those who devise torments for others inevitably become victims of their own ingenuity, that cruelty contains the seeds of its own destruction. The tools of tyranny eventually turn on those who wield them. Perillus created a device he believed would secure his fortune and position. Instead, he became its first victim, dying before his creation could even properly serve its intended purpose. His genius in acoustics and engineering was perverted into an instrument of systematic cruelty, and it killed him within hours of its unveiling. Phalaris used that same device to maintain power through fear, creating a reign of terror that seemed unbreakable. For 16 years, the bronze bull stood as proof that he was untouchable, that resistance was futile. Yet ultimately, that same bull became his tomb, and the screams it amplified in his final moments were celebrated rather than feared. Today, no confirmed examples of the original brazen bull survive. What remains are the historical accounts, warnings written by ancient historians who wanted us to remember not just what happened, but what it meant. That those who create instruments of torture often become their own victims. That tyranny, no matter how ingenious its methods, eventually collapses under the weight of its own cruelty. That power built on fear is power built on sand. The bronze has long since turned to dust or been melted down for other purposes, its atoms dispersed across 2.5 millennia. But somewhere in the archives of history, preserved in the words of Lucian and Diodorus and Pindar and Polyanos, you can still hear it. The sound of screams becoming music. The sound of genius turned nightmare. The sound of a man locked inside his own creation, realizing too late that brilliance without conscience builds nothing but tombs, and that sometimes the first person buried there is the architect himself.